All right. Hey, welcome everybody for the first Pathfinder Friday of 2019. And boy, howdy, do we have a good show ready for you. Let's see, last week or last time we did a show, we talked about an update for Pathfinder playtest. And we got that out of the way. And we were like, hey, let's get back into lore. So I talked to my old buddy, James. I was like, James, what are we going to talk about? And he knew right away. He had the answer. He said, we're going to talk about the Darklands, and it's going to be awesome, and these are the pictures you should use, and we're going to get this. We're going to kick off. In fact, this is a direct quote. He said, we're going to kick off 2019 and just blow the doors off the whole show.
That sounds just like me.
It is exactly like something James would say. I didn't just make that up and put words in his mouth.
No.
Anyway, everybody, welcome. I hope you had a good New Year. I hope you had a good holiday. I hope that you were buckled in. I hope you have a beverage. I hope your feet are up and you're so comfortable because James is in the house today.
Hey.
And we are talking about the Darklands.
Yes.
And then after that, we'll probably do some Q&A, I'm guessing.
Yep.
All right. Sounds like a plan. So how was your holiday?
It's a lot of work.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
You did.
Turns out we're doing this big project.
Yeah, it does.
So big projects don't stop for holidays.
And then the new year rang in like a beast for you, I assume.
Yeah, same thing. Was also still working on a big project.
Just working.
Yeah. I'm doing a lot of work on the bestiary and stuff like that. So monsters.
Oh, right. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll be able to preview that
someday.
Right here on this very show.
Yeah.
Hopefully. So get some spoilers going.
Yeah, lots of cool art coming in.
Yeah. Oh, man, I know. It's so amazing. Hey, speaking of art for the Pathfinder playtest, James, can I ask you a question?
You can.
Do you know who Wayne Reynolds is?
No. Who is
Wayne Reynolds is a guy that does a lot of the art. I would say most of the art. Some of the art for Pathfinder.
Oh, okay.
He's kind of iconic.
Yeah.
We might have some of his work right there.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this.
All right.
Would you like to meet Wayne Reynolds at some point in 2019?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. You know what you should do? Get yourself to PaizoCon.
Oh,
Boom.
PaizoCon.
Wayne Reynolds will be at PaizoCon. And also, so will we.
Yes.
We'll all be there.
Yep.
High-fiving and laughing and giggling and playing games. And we're doing panels. I think everybody, in fact, the first year I'm going to be doing a panel, which I'm super excited about. It's going to be fun.
Okay. That'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll be fine. You would dial 9-1 and just wait for something to happen.
Yeah.
So if you're interested, hit that link that I just put up in the chat. Come to PaizoCon. Come say hi to us. Tickets are on sale right now. If you get a 4-day badge and the banquet ticket, I think you get a discount or something. I could be wrong, but I think that's how that works. So anyway, there's that. Come to PaizoCon, see us, give us high fives, and let some of us run you through a game. We'll do a TPK.
Yay!
So fun. So on to the new business. We're here to talk about the Darklands.
The Darklands.
So first of all, let's get a nice overview of what the Darklands are.
All right. So the Darklands are basically the underworld of our setting, Golarion. And by underworld, I don't mean like hell or anything like that. I mean literally the hollow world, the creatures that live in caves down below. I mean, a lot of settings have this sort of, vast underground network of caverns of like creatures living in there. We, of course, have built a lot of the initial stuff on like 3.5 and all of that. So there's a lot of monsters that already have, legacies in these underground worlds, and it's like an entire like new campaign setting that basically lives downstairs from the one that we do most of our settings in. We did the first book early on in the Pathfinder's campaign setting books, Into the Darklands, which I wrote with Greg Vaughn, and it was a lot of fun. It's something that I've always been really a big fan of because it's got so many deep roots in the pulp stuff. Like, you got Edgar Rice Burroughs doing like the at the world's core type stuff with Pellucidar, the hollow world element of, stuff going on. You've got also Lovecraft actually in the Dreamland Saga has this entire underworld with like gugs and bulls and all of these things lurking in and like ghasts and ghouls and stuff like that. So there's a lot of just baked into the raw rules of the game monsters that like want to live down there. So with the Darklands, though, one thing that I wanted to do when I was starting to work on Into the Darklands is I wanted to explain why something like this could exist rather than just say it exists. Because, in the real world, if you dig a hole in the ground and you have a mine going like down into the caves under the crust of the earth, things get, they get hot. Air pressure starts building. It's really doesn't sustain life. You can't actually have like a jungle deep down under there or anything like that. So that's where, of course, magic comes in. And I also took some inspiration, of course, from my favorite author, Lovecraft, who in one of the stories that he ghost wrote, or wrote with another author, the Mound has this 3-layer underworld where there's like the top layer has got all of this one color light, and the bottom layer is completely lightless, and the middle layer is sort of blue, kind of lit. And
nice.
And so he's got like these 3 layers. And I was like, that's kind of cool. That basically gives us 3 flavors of this underground realm that we can play with, rather than just one that's spread out all over. So that was the initial idea that I had. And then the bottom one was basically, the whole thing was basically kind of built like in the ancient past by this group of creatures called vault builders, Zyomorns, which are these like weird earth elemental, super powerful creatures that like use this whole thing as their sort of little experiment. But
so they were working under their own to their own means, not forced into this.
There's a little bit also of like the Dan Simmons novel Hyperion, which has a bunch of like deep underground caves created by ancient aliens and stuff like that. So there's a lot of just like kind of all sorts of like inspirations from all over kind of landing here.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's basically the top layer, which we've called Narvoth. That is sort of the place where there's just like a bunch of little caves, smaller caves. They're not all necessarily connected. Durgar are one of the big threats that lurk here, and they're like these sort of just evil enslaver dwarves, and they just will grab you and put you to work in the mines and all that stuff. Like troglodytes live here. This is kind of the low level section of the Darklands. So it's up near the surface.
So it's reverse order. The low level is at the top.
Yeah.
And then you work your way down.
And that's where it's high level. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And then it's not really all connected. There's might be one big pocket of caverns underneath Varisia that's not necessarily directly connected to the pocket of caverns underneath Taldor, for example. And then down below that, you've got the larger sprawling level of Sekamina. And that's where like the Drow really live. Like the Drow city of Zernikanen is one of the biggest cities basically in this realm. And this is where it starts turning into its own sort of campaign setting. It's all interconnected. There's tunnels all over the place, and you get like all sorts of just monsters. This is like really the classic underworld, underground, maze-like warren of all sorts of stuff going on.
You can get lost out.
Oh yeah.
Not use, and that's the other thing. You can't use the sun. To map your way.
No. Yeah, you gotta
a compass would still work. I would.
Compass would still work, but there's always like these like weird radiation zones and stuff like that.
Yeah, plenty of things for a GM.
To mess with like giant worms and stuff like
around. That. Okay.
So that's kind of the classic traditional underground realm here, and then down deeper below that, you've got the realm of Orv, and Orv is kind of like rather than have like lots of little tunnels and caves and stuff all tangled up. Orv has these giant things called vaults.
Okay.
And each vault is its own sort of like theme. It's an enormous cave. Some of them are bigger than entire nations. And it's here that those vault builders, the Zyomorns, would create these things. They're miles under the earth, like way, way deep down. They'd magically enhance them so that they could support life. Some of them are like the hollow earth type thing. So you got like dinosaurs and stuff like that. And these jungles are going on down underground. And this gave me a chance to have a Tyrannosaurus fighting a froghemoth, which is the type
awesome.
Yes, that's the type of this like, well, I've always wanted to see this art. I can make it happen.
This is going to be a thing.
Yeah. So that's the case where you get like the hollow earth type things. And each one of these has its own theme. Like one of them is all about like I was saying, like dinosaurs living in there. Another one is Ilverandon, which is a place where these intellect devourers have built this like sort of Shangri-La of a utopia where they can use their stolen bodies to like live out their excesses in and stuff like that. And the sightless sea is this underground ocean where the aboleths are doing their thing. So
So and I assume there are creatures living in the sea. Is it?
Oh yeah. Aboliths, Shoggoths. There's these this race of like psychic albino humans called the Manavris who sail around on these jade ships and stuff like that. So there's all sorts of crazy stuff in there. There's these creatures called Erdeffens, which are from my homebrew campaign. They've got like clear skin and they're vampiric and they use these crazy swords with 2 blades. Again, going back to a lot of the pulp stuff, one of the things that we added into the Underground is the Serpent Folk as well. And that really kind of goes way, way back into the deep history of the setting. With the Serpent Folk used to be kind of the ones, this is even before the Drow were around. After the Vault Builders did their thing, because they were the first, they built this whole thing and then they took off. Serpent Folk came to power, and while you had like Aslant and all of these ancient human empires and Thassalon and stuff up on the surface, the Serpent Folk were down below and they were basically running the show. And I don't know if we've ever actually said this in print, but their nation is basically Sekamina. And so that's why the entire central realm of the Darklands is kind of named after their empire. And they were all over the place. They had this one city called Ilmuria, which is another example of an ancient city underground. It's got all this serpent motifs and stuff like that, and it's kind of lost and forgotten now. And that was a semi-spoiler alert. That's a big element of a certain adventure path that we have produced at a certain point in the time. I'm not going to say which one to kind of keep people guessing. You can figure it out probably by looking at the title of certain adventures. But
it's a gorgeous image, though.
Yeah, it's
the image
really cool, and
awesome.
It's just so much of this like pulp elements is really what I love about the Darklands and stuff. Like even go into like amazing stories with the Shaver mysteries with the Darrow, like kidnapping people and bringing them down in the dark. Morlocks with H.G. Wells have elements that have inspired the Darklands and stuff like that. So it's really kind of to a certain extent pulpy, and it's also really horror themed. There's not a lot of friendly people down there.
Yeah, I was just going to ask: is there a friendly nation? Is there an area you can get to where it's like
those albino humanoids, the Manavri? They're good guys. There's these deep gnomes they're not good, but they're not mean.
I'll take that.
That's the best you can get.
That's good.
Yeah,
compared to because as Lava Being says, it's just monsters all the way down.
It is. It's monsters all the way down, and that's the whole point. It's like. Not everywhere on the planet should be something that you know, that's where you come from. There's got to be places that you're afraid of.
Yeah, and that's true. And this is one of these places.
Yeah.
And, you know, we, and Jason, I used to be on a Monday Pathfinder game
right.
with Jason and Eric Mona. And
I've heard stories of that one.
We spent a considerable amount of time in Zerna-Canaan.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that the whole area itself is so oppressive. There's no sun.
Yeah.
The air is, stagnant. Everything you find is like, it's all fungus and molds and spores and glowing things, and it feels just oppressive to be in there. Like for some reason the whole area is perfect at giving you that idea that topside humans aren't really supposed to be down here. It just feels perfectly tailored to that.
Yeah. And actually, bringing up Zerna-Canaan, while Greg Vaughn and I wrote the initial Into the Darklands book and did a lot of work there. I should also mention Wes Schneider had a lot of work on it. He's the one who invented Zerna-Canaan and did a lot of that work. Okay. He and I, and with able assistance from James Sutter, were handling the second Darkness adventure path. That was our third adventure path that we published back in the day. And that was also the one where it's like, this is one where we're going to introduce what the Drow are doing in our setting. This is one we're going to introduce the Darklands and basically, drill down on a lot of these classic tropes that people were really, have always, that we've been fans of in like Dungeons and Dragons and other games like that. And where we wanted to bring our own kind of take to them. And that's basically where it's like, we want to do a 3-layer underground realm. Talking to Wes, I was like, I want you and actually looking at Zerna-Canaan, it kind of evokes that. There's 3 different levels to Zerna-Canaan. There's like the main city, and then there's like a place up above where the nobles rule, and then down below is like the workshop. It's all lava and like gross, and it's the janitor level.
It's the janitor level in Zerna-Canaan.
Yeah.
So then, this has been here for a while.
Yes.
And it took some time to be discovered, I assume. Is there a story around the discovery of? I guess I'm calling them topsides or
there was a lot of
them. They call them. I don't know what they would call them.
I think we called them. into the Darklands has a section at the front that's got like lingo and stuff like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think
nice. Okay.
we called them Toplanders or Surf or something. I know
Yeah.
Kyle Hunter, who used to work here, called it the Overbright,
The Overbright.
which is a really cool name. We
I
did
like
that back
that.
in the magazine days. But yeah, it's certainly a case. Well, I mean, like when Earthfall happened, and that was a couple of shows ago. We were talking about Earthfall and all of that. All of these different cultures fled, Galarian. So, like the elves, for example, fled through their portals to another planet. But some of these elves were like, we're not going to. This is our home. We're going to stick around here, but we're not going to stay on the surface where it's going to get blasted and all that. So they just fled down into these caves, and they just went deeper and deeper and deeper. And as this group of elves went deeper, they started bickering and having power struggles. A section of them was like, screw you guys. They took off and did their own thing,
Right.
and they started like infighting and backstabbing each other. And it's their own fears and hatreds and stuff started bubbling up, and it just went bad. And
that's how they got evil. Like,
yeah,
that's how they
sort of, yeah. And elves are like, the longer they live in an area, they start to take on elements of that. So like snowcaster elves are going to be like kind of pale and like snow, like white, and like normal elves that live in the forest are like tall and lithe, like towering trees. But
Right.
when these elves went down underground in Galarian, that's Rovagug is metaphorically and sort of physically stuck inside the core of the world. And so the idea is that they went deep, 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 and they started getting too close to Rovagug. And he sort of melted out of his little cave psychically, spiritually, and influenced them. Demon lords were involved. So yeah, that basically, all of this kind of made this sort of perfect storm that transformed these elves who were trying to flee the end of the world, turned them into the first drow.
So then when so then that would be the next question that I have is,
Yep.
What's below that? Like, what is like the lowest thing before you start actually making your way back up to the surface again?
So, and that's another thing too, is we've always kind of viewed Galarian on one level. It's a fantasy setting,
Yeah, absolutely.
but it's also built on science and reality and all that. That's why the planet is approximately the same shape and size as Earth. It's got a moon the same size as our moon. Because nobody here is an astrophysicist. We don't know what'll happen to if we make the planet twice as big and everything, gravity, whatever, that type of thing starts getting really complicated. And we want a recognizable base to put our setting on so that you can be, intrigued by the exceptions. You're not worried about how tides work because
Right.
it's assumed.
They work.
The number of days in the year is the same. You don't have to relearn the calendar to play this game, really. And by extension, with the Darklands, while we have this magic that, like, the deeper you go, there's these vaults that are holding on to that have magic that make things habitable. That doesn't go all the way to the actual center of the planet. That still is all contained within Galarian's crust, which is about 7 miles thick or something like that. Under that, it's the mantle. It's the liquid iron core and all of that. It's the same sort of thing that Earth has, which is why we can say there's still a magnetic North Pole on Galarian. It just kind of works all the same way. Yeah, exactly. There's still continental drift and all of that. Rovagug's prison is its own plane, but you can access it from the center of the world.
Really?
And so
Okay.
it's not actually physically there, but it's metaphorically there, and maybe influences the heart of the planet some way. Yeah, so it's still sort of, it's science if you go down too deep. And that's also why, going back to the Great Beyond and the planar adventure stuff we did a while back, why we set up the elemental planes in the order they go. So like, if you're on Galarian and you're basically coming down, the first thing you hit is the air, the atmosphere. Next thing you're going to hit probably is going to be water, because it's mostly water. And then the next thing you're going to hit is the earth, the crust, and you go all the way down through that, you hit fire. And when you go to the edge of the universe, it kind of does that in reverse. The first thing you hit is the elemental plane of air, then the elemental plane of water, then the elemental plane of earth, and then finally elemental plane of fire. And if you go all the way through that, you're in the outer rifts and all of that, and on your own in the astral plane.
Wow.
Anyway, so that's sort of a rant.
That's really amazing. That would be a good clip if somebody wants to clip that little bit.
Yeah.
Because I mean, these are things that you can probably find here and there.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
It's good just to get all of this in one little chunk of information, So things like that are great.
Yeah.
So then, what do we assume happens with, as far as if there's a common enemy that they share. Do these different denizens of the deep get along enough that they could partner together and maybe fight off a common enemy?
Not really. I mean, that's one of the big things with the Darklands is it's intended to be a place for you to go to do adventures and stuff like that. And if there's a common theme among the Darklands, is that they don't really all get along down there. There's like the Drow and the Morlocks and the Duergar and the Erdeffins and the Darrows and the Intellect Devourers and all of these different sort of monstrous and evil races. A lot of them are chaotic. They just bicker, they fight. There's a lot of, infighting and stuff like that. And there's a lot of areas that are just completely wilderness, like crazy undead. There's like this place called the Black Desert, which it's infused with radiation and unlife, and there's only undead things, except these giant worms that can survive there somehow. There's a place called, one of my favorite actual places is the Midnight Mountains, which is kind of going through the middle of the Darklands under the Inner Sea. It's just this wildland of just where the really powerful high-level monsters live, like the worst of the umbral dragons and these giant moo spores and gug nations and all sorts of just crazy stuff. But I've always the Midnight Mountains came about basically is like the idea is like, what happens if you fall into a bottomless pit, like a well or something like that, and you're falling and it's dark, and then suddenly you realize you're falling towards the top of a mountain range. Right. It's like that'll mess with your mind.
That would really mess with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
So it's kind of just really, when you get right down to it, the Darklands is just the giantest of giant dungeons.
Yeah.
So,
and it's,
rather than a room with like a monster inside the room, it's a cave with an entire nation of monsters.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems to have enough juicy details to it that a GM could use a lot of fun stuff from there.
I mean, we've done all sorts of different adventures with them. Like I was saying, the Second Darkness was one of the first ones we did, but just recently we released Cradle of Night.
Yes.
Which is the latest module we've released. And this one goes into the Darklands. It works with this race of creatures called the Caligni, and investigates their history with the Darklands and how they've basically been reduced as sort of like, not quite feral society. They're not evil, but they're just sort of weird and warped and twisted. And again, that was myself, Neil Spicer, and Greg Vaughn got together, and Wes Schneider did the original. Yeah. So it's kind of like we got the band together again. So
well, that's been going on. I mean, that project has been going on for a little while too. I remember it was really funny. I actually had people on social media were just starting to inquire about it. So like, hey, what about this? You said this, and it was like, oh yeah, no, that is moving forward.
It's sort of it got hit a bunch of snags and stuff like that. So we got to it eventually.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's interesting that one of the things that is amusing about the Darklands is that it kind of turns you into monsters as well. That is sort of the sort of generic story. You got the elves going down and being corrupted and becoming drow. You've got humans going down there and being corrupted and becoming Calignis or Morlocks. You've got serpent folk down there, and they're doing their thing, and then their time runs over and they sort of degenerate into these sort of bestial societies. So there's a lot of like the idea of like this like weird evil magic radiation and stuff like that down there, that it'll mess you up if you stay down there too long.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think depending on how solid you want to RP the group, like there's also the psychological issues, where I think in real life that would actually
like you were saying,
very affecting.
Like you were saying, there's a lot of things you take for granted if you just live on a planet like we do. When you get in the Darklands, there's no sun, and if there's no sun and moon, how do you navigate? How do you tell when it's time to wake up or go to sleep? It's a case of like you can't just go anywhere because the walls are there. There's solid walls all over the place. What happens if the cave that you've been living in collapses? There's a lot of stuff going on down there that's pretty dangerous.
It definitely is an interesting setting for sure. And Cradle of Night is available right now.
Yeah.
If you're interested in picking that up and checking it out, and it's a spooky one.
It is. I wouldn't say it's not intentionally. It's not horror themed, but it is certainly. delves into some creepy backstory, like the Caligni, how they are influenced by this new pantheon of demigods called the Forsaken, which we haven't said anything about ever until this adventure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like there's the first world where all the Fae live, and they're ruled by the eldest. On the Shadow Plane, there used to be this group that was kind of the inverse of the eldest, and they are gone now, and they're only remembered as the Forsaken. And the adventure itself has like a lot of more information about what happened to them and how they may or may not be coming back and all of that.
Oh, nice. Okay. So it doesn't really put a bow on anything.
No,
just says,
it's real.
This is a thing.
Yeah, and that's also just one of my generalized. I'm sure I said this on the show or elsewhere in seminars or something. Whenever I explain something in the setting,
right, I
like to introduce at least 2 more mysteries. So like in Cradle of Night, we explain a lot about the Caligni and the the Dark Folk and the Dark Creepers and all of that stuff, what they are, how they are, where they came from, why they are called the Caligni.
Right.
But I wanted there to be new mysteries, so it's like they used to be involved with this group called the Forsaken, and there's all this other stuff going on. It's kind of like the idea of like if you're logging a forest, you need to plant more trees than you cut down.
Yeah.
Because if you don't plant trees, you log yourself out of a job. If we explain every secret and tell every story that we have to tell,
yeah,
we're done. We don't want to be done.
Barren. Yeah, totally. And see, now look, Lone Dwarf just before we started the show, I said I have to figure out a way to work a Lost reference in because I've done that for the last few shows now.
Well, and you already used the word Lost earlier on the show, and I thought that was it. But
no, I was going to try for something better. But
okay.
But there it is. I love it.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
That sort of. Back in the day, I mean, people were obsessed with Lost when it was going here at Paizo. We would, Wednesday would happen and Thursday, like, we use Max here, and I basically was like, I need an avatar for my hard drive, and so I basically photoshopped that symbol. They have on all the hatches, like the swan and all of that stuff, except it's got the Paizo golem in the middle.
Oh, no way!
Yeah,
I would like to see a copy of that, please. Because I'm sure it's still around.
It is. It's still on my computer.
To see it. I used to do a bad movie night. Quick side story. I used to do a bad movie night in downtown Seattle every first Tuesday of the month. And that was our main logo.
Oh, nice.
Was the Bhagavita, I think is what it's called, and the Dharma symbol. And in the middle was a film reel.
Oh, nice.
So
dripping with slime. Or just a plain old film reel.
It was just the outline of a film reel.
Fair enough.
So,
you ever do sorority babes in the slime bowl bolorama and that thing, or
no? Because we'll get into this in the Q&A.
Okay, fair enough.
Let me do a goodbye. Yeah, the Dharma Initiative. That's exactly what it was. Let me do a wrap up here, and then we'll jump into Q&A with the chat.
Sounds great.
On Twitch. So. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This was a fun time. If you would like to know more about the Darklands or anything like that, feel free to check out Cradle of Night. It's out right now. You can grab that on Paizo.com. And if you enjoyed this show that we just did, maybe think about joining us live Fridays at 4 p.m. Pacific at twitch.tv/officialpaizo. After we're done here, we're going to do some Q&A with the chat. If you'd like to be a part of it, join us. It's a lot of fun. And until then, let's see. Am I covering everything? Am I forgetting anything?
You are, maybe. I don't know.
Probably I am.
I'm just sitting here smiling.
Come to PaizoCon. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, until then, for Paizo and for my pal James Jacobs, and for me, I'm your old buddy Dan. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.